Um, so good morning, everybody. Welcome to another STC webinar. Today we'll have Tony Priest presenting on how to recruit the best people and how to keep them. Obviously very relevant in this this environment, because a lot of it is going to be about, you know, how you interact with people virtually, because obviously face-to-face meetings are kind of tricky. So looking forward to this one. I think it should be good. As you all know, it's part of an overall series that we're doing. So we've got another 3 lined up. So the next one is going to be about maximizing your cash flow. This is going to be run by CDAS, which should be quite interesting. The next one after that is going to be Grant Thornton on business continuity planning. Obviously, you know, great to have a look at getting back out of the current situation. And then we've got another one lined up on cyber risks and opportunities in the supply chain. So that's all around to do around cybersecurity and relying on your partners. And then we've got another couple that I'm planning at the moment, so we'll release those as and when we have them. So obviously the STC website has all the details on that. As per usual, we'll be recording this one. We'll send everybody a video who's registered, so they can have a look back. We'll share all the slides as well, so you've got all the information that you need. And we'll provide Tony's details as well if you want to follow up with him personally, so we can do all of that. So we'll kind of leave it there for me at the moment as a brief introduction. So I'll now hand over to Tony to run through the presentation and tell us all about how to recruit the best folks. Over to you, Tony.
Thanks very much, Pim. Right, let me just share screen and make sure this technology works. Hopefully that now works.
It works for me.
Yeah, there we go. Oh, we've got those funny lines back again, but that will resolve itself, I'm sure. Right, good morning, everybody. Thanks very much for logging on and having a look at this. We clearly are living through unusual times at the moment, so I wanted to give really an outline of what the recruitment process should look like, and how in the current circumstances that may be adapted and modified to deal with the situation we're currently in. So I'm going to go through the process of how it should be, really covering from drawing up a job description, understanding the reasons of why you're recruiting, and then how do you actually go about doing that. So working with people such as ourselves, working people through your own internal HR people that some companies have, how you handle interviews, and then about finally offer, and then the final piece about people joining and how you ensure they actually stay working for you. So just as a little bit of background for people, so that's the things I'm going to cover. So as a little bit of background for people, one of the things that everybody talks about right at the beginning, and it doesn't matter whether we're in a pandemic or not, is why should somebody change jobs? There's all the obvious reasons of, well, somebody's moving location for family reasons, somebody wants career advancement, somebody wants more money. But from an employer point of view, in order to attract those individuals, engagement is absolutely key. And when I talk about engagement, it's really how do you establish an emotional engagement with that candidate and future employee. If you can get that, and you can get that part of it right, then not only will you attract the best candidates, they will want to come and work for you, and they will want to work for you well and hopefully for the long time. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about how you go about doing that in a minute, but that's really when you're looking to recruit somebody, is how do you get that engagement? If you get that right, you're well and truly down the right road. So some of the things that are just going on at the moment, and really just kind of general information, some of the biggest challenges, and it still exists now, or even in the pandemic, is the availability of candidates with the right skills. And that's both the right hard skills, so the technical skills to do the job you want them to do, whether it's IT programming, whether it's management accounts and finance, whether it's engineering or legal, And then also the right soft skills. So their character, their ability to empathize, their ability to collaborate with your particular team. And everybody has a different team, so everybody needs to understand what the right soft skills are as well. We're seeing a lot more now in the market than in the past about employers' brand and their own values are absolutely key in attracting candidates and retaining them. People coming into the marketplace are very interested in what it is you do and why are you doing it, and what are your own values in the way of working and in the way you interact with the local environment and your supply chain, your partners, your own clients. In the past, that wasn't so much the case. It's very much the case now. That 74% is a figure from last year, and I would suspect coming out of the pandemic that will be even a more greater consideration. And as it says in the other one about employees, a clear sense of purpose. So not only understanding what the company does, but what do they do? What do they actually, what's the point of their job? What is the purpose of their role? And how does that fit into the bigger picture? These are all the things that help get the engagement with candidates. So just by going into a recruitment saying, I want to employ somebody, that's not going to get you the best people and get you and keep them. You've got to think about these issues as well. And then the other challenge we have, which is always an ongoing challenge, particularly in the larger corporations, is the speed of recruitment. Where if somebody is coming onto the market and they have highly marketable skills, or they are skills that are in high demand, and they have all the right soft skills, that candidate is going to have a number of companies after them. They are probably not just going to be talking to you, and it's quite likely that they will end up with 2 or 3 offers. And what we've seen repeatedly, and I've been involved personally in recruitment since the mid-80s, and I've run a recruitment company since the early 2000. This continues all the way through. The best candidates go quickly. If you are thinking about having a recruitment process that will last a long time, the chances are by the time you end up getting to the person you might want to employ, they've already had an offer and gone somewhere else. So you need to move the recruitment process along at a reasonable kind of pace, and it needs to have clarity from the start with the candidates. Again, one of the things that I think irritates candidates is when either you, the client, or we, your ambassador, can't really explain the recruitment process from the beginning. So getting that process understood from the beginning is absolutely key to ensuring engagement and ensuring that people stay in the process. The other things that just need to be considered as you enter the process, we've got new generations of people. We've all heard about millennials coming into the workforce. We've now got what's so-called Generation Z, people that are just beginning to enter at the very early stages of the workforce. And there was a Deloitte survey, as it says there, that by 2025, so only 5 years' time, 75% of the population will fall into those groupings. And for those groupings, all the surveys indicate, as we've talked about above, that the sense of purpose is going to be absolutely key. And that group of individuals, the way they engage in the recruitment process has fundamentally changed from times past. The mobile is absolutely key. They consume pretty much everything on some form of mobile device. So how you attract people not only has to be all the right information, it has to be presented to them in the right way, in the way that they can engage and engage quickly. We also have social media, whether that's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and various other platforms. The individuals use those platforms. And I'll talk about the positive experience in a minute, but a lot of candidates use those platforms to see what experiences other candidates have had of your recruitment process. So the days have gone when this information wasn't known. Everybody can easily find out now what people might think of your recruitment process. So those are all considerations we need to make. So, and those numbers are from Deloitte's Rec and Hudson. So if we think about considerations before you start, there's a list there. Most of those relatively are really quite obvious, but it's surprising how many people enter this process and do not have the answers to those questions. And it's one of the first questions that we ask when we get spoken to about, can you help us recruit a software developer? One of the first questions we ask is, why are you wanting to recruit a software developer? And it's quite surprising that often the recruiting manager gets a bit stumped at that point as to the reasons. So is this an existing job and you had somebody resign? Well, what are the reasons for that resignation? Is it relevant to how that job is perceived and how that job is structured? Is it a new role? Why is it a new role? If you're expanding, how are you expanding? Are you going to continue to expand? What's the team like? So all of those sorts of things are fairly obvious. Proper job descriptions. Again, it's one that a lot of recruiting managers fall down on. We ask for a job description, they haven't got one. So, and we're willing to help write one, but a job description of some form needs to exist right up front. With the larger corporations, there's a tendency for recruiting managers to dig out, as it were, the previous job description. We hear that a number of times. I'll dig out and email you the previous job description. Well, maybe, but when was the last time that was used? Has the job changed in that period of time? And again, we find that very frequently. Stakeholders, who's going to be involved in the interviews, make sure they're actually available. Make sure you've actually scheduled in. If you're very busy and you've got a lot going on, think about how you're going to allocate time to the process. So what's going to happen, how you're going to look at interviews, how you're going to do a second interview, how long they're going to be, if you're going to do a test, what's that? Have a view of really what your perfect candidate looks like. So what in your mind does talent look like? What sort of skills should they have? Soft skills, hard skills, maybe location. Do you want them commuting a long way or not? What about relocation? What about their soft skills in terms of collaboration? Are they going to work in a very tight-knit team? Are they going to work remote? All of those things need to be considered. And then you've got your things that you really must have in an individual. And then you've got the things that you can effectively, they're desirable. You can relax those maybe a little bit. And then we've talked about a clear business purpose. One of the most popular questions, I think, of candidates asking of interviewing managers is about the purpose of the company. What's the point of my role? If you cannot articulate that at the first interview, then really that we've got to get that right from the start, so that we get that engagement right from the start. And then the final thing to consider before you actually start the process is being ready to actually react. So when candidates come through, whether that's from your own resources or from an agency or from wherever, you're actually able to interview. And also, if you find a candidate, you actually have the mechanism in place to put a job offer, to put an employment contract, and to do those things quickly. Again, unfortunately, we hear many times of people saying, right, I'd like to put an offer, but it's going to take HR a week to get the documentation out to them, or we need to write some terms and conditions of employment. You can have all of those things done, and that presents you in a very positive light when you react quickly and you're able to keep the candidates engaged and on board. So those are things that can all be dealt with beforehand. We can help with a lot of that. And if you're in a larger corporation, HR should have some of that in place. Then you come on really to thinking about the actual candidates. What will motivate and engage them to join or to consider joining your organization. So what are they looking for? So turn the whole process on its head, not necessarily what you are looking for, but what are they looking for? Because this is now very much a two-way street. You're interviewing them, they will be interviewing you. As I've said, they will probably have choices. So they want to make sure they make the right choice. So what are they looking for? Particular experience? Are they looking to work on particular technology? Are they looking for career growth, certifications, particularly in finance? Are they looking for training packages to become certified, whether that's ATA, ACCA, ACA, etc.? In IT, are they wanting to do Microsoft exams or otherwise? Flexibility around the role, remote working, working in an office, salary is obviously there. And then you're getting into understanding their own circumstances about their own family, work life, commute times. And then you're getting into some of the wider issues of your own social commitment and how they might want to be involved in an organization that has a very clear and articulate social commitment. And then the final one is really about employee inspiration, is how do you inspire those employees? If you're working in a startup with some very sexy technology or something like that, or some very sexy engineering, that might be quite easy. If you're working in a financial institution, it's a large corporation, you just need to think about that a little bit more to how you would go about inspiring employees into your organization. So it's not always easy, but there's always something there that comes back to what is your business purpose? Why are you there? What are you hoping to achieve? What do you contribute back into the world? And if you can articulate that, then you should be able to inspire potential new employees. So having now understood what it is we're looking for and we're ready to go, how do you go about finding candidates? You can work with an organization such as ourselves. We have a lot of experience of drawing up job descriptions, background screening, selecting candidates, pre-interviewing, all sorts of things. And obviously, if you're going to do a recruiter selection, you need to really understand that they are your brand ambassador. The first contact that a candidate is likely to have is with that agency, and therefore that agency is representing you. So it's in your interest to really ensure that as much information is given to that recruiter about your business purpose, about your company, what it is you're trying to do, so that they can properly explain that to the candidates. So really from a recruiter selection point of view, you're trying to understand is, are they listening? Are they understanding? First of all, do they get your business and really what your team and objectives are? I think with recruitment and recruitment agencies, what's changed over recent years is less is more. The days when perhaps you would put a job out and put it out with 30 agencies because you think that would get you the best coverage have long gone. Now most candidates would view that as, oh, they're obviously a bit desperate to find people because I keep seeing the same job everywhere. So in some respects now, less is more. Identify maybe 2 organizations that you feel comfortable with. And if you select the right organizations, they will be able to find the right candidate. They will be able to develop a talent pool or a pipeline of individuals for you. You don't necessarily need 10, 15, 8 agencies all working on the same job. It in effect actually devalues the role and devalues your own organization to a certain extent. If you use your own internal recruitment company resources, or in fact you do it yourself, you need to think, as we've mentioned, about what your digital strategy is. Just putting it on a job board and hoping for the best isn't going to attract you the best candidates. You need to think about social media, the demographic of your candidates, what is it they engage with, all of those sorts of things. Artificial intelligence has a role potentially to play. It will no doubt have more of a role in the future. It will help with maybe where there is a large pool of candidates. It can help with sifting those down into a more manageable group. If you're looking for a very small number of individuals, it might be able to help identify those by wading through social media and maybe seeing where particular people are making comments about particular subject matter. But either way, you come down to people. The old adage of people by people first is very much true in what we do. And at the end of the day, the candidate will engage with you and vice versa. So technology has a role. It certainly has a role in getting the introductions set up. But once that is the case, then it comes down to individuals and chemistry. And clearly at the moment with the pandemic, technology is used to be able to do remote interviewing, etc. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. Candidate care. The candidates, the recruiters, they're all your brand ambassadors. We've seen it numbers of times, admittedly, thankfully, very rarely, where interviews go badly wrong. And occasionally candidates feel very annoyed with how that interview process went, and they feel the need to go on something like social media or Glassdoor, and they make a commentary about the organization and how disorganized the interview was or whatever. Other candidates see that. People talk to each other. One of the best places of advice that people go to, whether it's right or wrong, but people do, is to their own peers and their own friends. They listen, they respect that advice in a lot of cases. So getting a positive experience for any candidate, even if they're unsuccessful, is absolutely key. Every candidate should come out of this learning something and having some kind of positive experience. That way, whatever the commentary may be that goes out into the wider domain will be positive about you, about your company, and about the process. And that can only help. Obviously, as you get into the interviews, showing passion for what it is you do, the briefing of candidates, background and screening, whether that's you, your own internal HR or recruitment companies, then all of that is key as well. So there's a lot that can be done, and there's a lot to be done in that area as well. And then we really come on to the process. As I've mentioned, the key one, if somebody asked me one thing, and that's what I would do, pacey and purposeful. With the smaller organizations, this is an area that you really do have an advantage. You normally have less people to consider. You can make decisions quicker. That's one of your key advantages over a larger organization, where they tend to have maybe a more stricter process. HR needs to get involved heavily. They might need to meet 3 or 4 people over 3 or 4 interviews. So really be clear on the process up front, make it pacey, and make it very purposeful of what you're trying to achieve with the candidates. Whether you're face-to-face in the what's currently the good old days, or whether you're remote, that still applies. If you're doing remote interviews, really just consider the technology being used. Is Zoom appropriate? Is FaceTime appropriate? Skype? There's no reasons in the very near future, I suspect, why you can't meet with people, providing you socially distance and you can have a coffee or something. And there's a point of which you should be able to do that in the process. But initially in the process, there's nothing wrong with doing a video call with somebody, even having an initial telephone call with somebody, just to ensure you're all on the right wavelength. And then once you're actually getting into the face-to-face, where that can be achieved, then you want to make sure that is organized quickly and it has a clear purpose to it. Any feedback from those discussions is given timely. Again, particularly with the large corporations, we see that as a problem, that feedback takes a long time. And there's nothing more, I think, irritating for candidates is they make all the effort of going to an interview, they sit for an hour at the interview, they get no feedback for a week or so. It really isn't good. It really isn't respectful to the candidate. It makes life very difficult for them and anything else they may be doing. So you should be able to get feedback to the candidate of what is happening within 24 hours or so. Obviously, as we've mentioned, it should be positive. So even if it's no, it's not going to go any further, give some clear reasons that hopefully the candidate can learn from and can do something with. It's maybe they didn't come over confident, they hadn't done their research, they didn't know enough about something. Give them something that they can learn from and they have a positive outcome from. Follow a clear process. So again, there is no risk of any kind of adverse reaction by individuals in ways of discrimination or otherwise, that you followed a clear, sustainable process through the interviews. It also means that any comparisons can be made. And I would also suggest at a certain point that you maybe consider having two individuals with the candidate to get that balanced view and to ensure what is said is clearly understood. You don't necessarily need to do that first of all, but certainly at one of the stages before any offer might be made, you want to ensure that is the case. Second interviews, as we talked about, pacey and purposeful, make sure there's a clear reason, make sure the candidate knows who they're coming in to see and why. And we've talked about positive experience, and we've talked about all of these interviews. You need to be aware the candidate is assessing you and assessing your brand and how that fits. They are interviewing you as well. And then really the final area is, having now gone through all of that, you get to the point where you actually have now found your candidate. Hopefully you have all of your paperwork ready. Hopefully you've been clear through the process. There is an offer negotiation. Often we get involved in that stage. We can help in that. It needs to be done timely and with clarity. And ideally you get to the point where the candidate makes a verbal acceptance of the offer. The moment you get to that point, you need to ensure that any offer documentation, so confirmation first of all of the offer, goes out pretty quickly, certainly within 24 hours. There's no reason why some kind of email can't go to the candidate from you, HR, at least advising the details of the offer, asking them to at least send an email back to say they've accepted, and that should then be immediately followed up, if not with the first email, the draft documentation of terms and conditions of employment, clarity around holidays, benefit packages, whatever else is as part of the conversation that's gone on. Clear understanding around notice periods. Can they join immediately, a month? Because don't forget, that person may well be wanting to resign, but isn't going to resign until that offer has all been agreed. And then we can get into start dates and notice periods. I think one of the things we see very often, again, particularly with the medium to larger corporations, is where there is a HR department, is at this point, it has a habit of going wrong, because the recruiting managers kind of think they've done their job and it's now down to HR to handle all the paperwork. And HR sometimes will take that process on and be very clear, but other times they're still thinking that the recruiting manager is talking to the candidate. And we do sometimes fall into the situation where the candidate goes a period of time and nobody has spoken to them, and they're just feeling a little bit lost in where the process is. So if you are the recruiting manager, please make sure you keep in contact with the candidate, or that your organization is doing that whilst the notice period is going on. It may only be a week, but it could be 3 months. The thing to consider is, albeit the candidate has accepted, that candidate's information is still out in the digital world. It's still highly likely that that candidate will receive phone calls from other agencies or from other employers about potential job offers. And the last thing you want is for a slightly disgruntled potential candidate, because they haven't heard from you for 6 weeks, is to be talking to somebody else about joining that company and not taking up the offer. So that constant communication through that notice period is key. And then really the final stage, which is absolutely key, is the onboarding. Clarity around when are they joining, what time, where have they got to go, dress code, making sure you have all of their tech ready. So if they're getting mobile phones, laptops, passwords, access badges, all of those things are all ready from day one. And then have a very, very clear, articulate and transparent plan with them as to what that onboarding process looks like. What are they expecting to achieve in day one, week one, month one? Who are they going to meet? Really to make them feel involved in the organization. There was a survey very recently around employees, I think it was last year, and it might have been Deloitte or Pricewaterhouse. It was one of those two. And they did a survey of employees that left an organization within the first 3 years of joining. And they asked a lot of questions as to the reason why. And interestingly, one of the most popular answers, and I think it was in the area of about 40% of employees that left stated this as one of the reasons as to why, was during the early stages of employment. So during that key day one, week one, month one, they didn't feel that they were involved in the company. They didn't feel the company was ready for them. They didn't feel that the company really kind of cared for them. Now, and it's interesting that that sits in the back of the head and lingers. And it may mean that people start looking for a new role fairly early on, but it took them 2 years to find another one. It just means they're not engaged. You haven't created that all-important emotional connection between them and your company that would ensure that they work hard and enjoy, and everybody enjoys the experience. So it was quite horrifying that, as I said, 40% of people that left stated that as a reason. And that could have been a bad onboarding experience 3 years ago, but it still niggled with them. So getting that constant feedback is key. And then we mentioned really about generations and different demographics of people coming into the workforce. In the old days, new employees would be given a handbook. That's really gone out the window now. Some organizations still do it. It's very, very old. Now, most people want to consume information by video. You should all have that on your internal systems. And really, they should be able to consume all of the employee information about the company, history, policies. They should be able to consume most of that now by video, and they can obviously do that via their different devices, etc., in their own time, without having to sit at a desk and wade through a 50-page handbook, which actually very recently I have seen at one employer. So those are really kind of the process. And then I guess as a final slide from me, before any questions, is just really the key points. Candidate driven. The process has changed, digital, social, but it's still about chemistry. It's still about identifying the right skills, both hard and soft. It's still about getting that emotional engagement. From a company point of view, before you start, making sure you're clear on your purpose, your brand, your values, because you will be asked, candidates will research that. Please make time to recruit. Again, that's always a challenge, I know, but entering into the process and then telling someone that you haven't got time for the next 3 weeks to do any interviews isn't the most best start to the process. as I said, salary is not the driver anymore. It's one of them, but it's many other things. And understanding that from your likely demographic of candidates is key. If you use a recruiter, please engage with them. They are your brand ambassador. Make sure they've got everything that they need, because they will be working with the candidates from day one and need to ensure that they can present you in the right way. And then you've got the obvious things of a proper selection process that we've gone through, the things you need to cover, and then engagement, not just from day one, but from the offer, and then really to ensure continuous engagement right the way through. And there's many different ways that people can do that. So I think that kind of covers the process from before you even actually start to recruit, all the considerations right the way through to you've now hired a good person, and this would certainly put you in a good position to retain those good people that you've gone through the effort of hiring. So hopefully that gives everyone a good overview, and I guess Pim will now throw it open to any questions, etc.
Oh. Thank you, Tony. I'm trying to unmute people. I don't know why that's not quite working. Thank you very much for that. I thought it was very interesting. I just have a quick question on the onboarding that you mentioned.
Okay.
Because I mean, I've certainly experienced that over my career, where there's good examples and bad examples and things like that. But obviously in today's environment, because I know we're all encouraged to get back to work and all that sort of stuff, but clearly quite a lot of people are still going to work from home, and you might need to onboard people kind of like remotely, because they won't necessarily go into the office if they have like a remote role and things. Given how important the onboarding process is and make them feel wanted and appreciated and all of those things, have you got any advice on how to best go about that in this environment? Because obviously that must be quite tricky if they essentially will remote work even initially.
Yeah, it's a good question. Thanks, Pim. I mean, obviously, in some respects, it depends on the role, whether the role is able to be managed remotely. There are some roles that people really need to still come into the office and work, even if in a small team with people. But where individuals are remote and it's unlikely that they'll be able to come in and meet their new colleagues for a period of time, there are plenty of mechanisms to do. First of all, there's the information about the company, ensuring that, as I said, they understand what the company is about, its brand, its values, its mission, what their role is about. It's a little bit more difficult when they're remote, but that is still manageable. There is plenty of ways to get video information to them. There is plenty of ways for people to communicate. So with a new employee, certainly they should be having either team or Zoom meetings with their line manager, maybe with a director of the company, depending on how big you are, with HR. That needs to be very constant. And then I think for me, the one thing that a candidate would want in that circumstance is clarity around what is expected of them. That they're not just kind of bombarded with information, but no one's actually being clear with, well, what are we expecting from you in terms of deliverables? When people are it's moving out of the workplace now, but there certainly historically has been a trait of presenteeism. I just like seeing my people out there, and if they're not sitting out there, then I'm worried about what they're doing. That is going out. A lot more people are now very comfortable with remote working. You're now getting people coming through as managers that have grown up with remote working, so they are more comfortable with it. But you need to keep that communication flowing both ways. And you need to ensure, if you are a line manager in that circumstance, that you're not being distant. You're seen to be contactable at all times, whether that's on team and you can just flick on video, or whether it's that there are Zoom or Skype meetings happening. And then, as I said, it's just about clarity of what's expected from the new employee. If you're not expecting them to, we understand you can't work fully efficiently at the moment because we're not in the office. Well, explain that to them. Maybe explain to them, look, we understand you've got kids at home. If you want to work some hours during the day and you want to do some hours in the evening when the kids have gone to bed, well, explain that to them. Just be transparent. And I think everybody then can make that work. There's no reason. The problems arise when people don't communicate and aren't transparent with each other.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you also think that there might be scope in sort of that same vein where you want to make new people part of like a bit more of a social thing between your staff? So if you do like a staff quiz on a Thursday evening because at the moment you can't get them together in real life and all that sort of stuff, so presumably you want to build up that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, every organization is different. I mean, if you're in a relatively small organization, that's obviously quite easy to do. It needs to be appropriate, the number of times you do it. And I think the other thing is the new employee must feel comfortable not going to a quiz night on the Friday night. Because for all you know as the line manager, Friday night may be the night that is bath night with the kids or something. And actually, by then kind of saying, right, well, we always do a quiz night on a Friday night, you should join this, you've immediately now put your new employee in a slightly awkward position. So it comes back to what I said of communication and transparency. By asking the candidate, or now your new employee, okay, we're in this situation, what is your own kind of home life situation? Do you have a garden? Are you in a cramped flat? Do you have kids? All of these sorts of things that will help you present the right mechanics for ensuring everybody in the team can get involved. Just because you currently do something in a particular way with a number of staff, it doesn't necessarily mean that the brand new employee can immediately change their own home life to fit that. And the last thing you want to do is make them feel guilty because they couldn't, at short notice, join a quiz night that happens at 7 o'clock on a Friday.
Yeah, and alienate them from the outset.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. And larger organizations, again, you very rarely ever do of those sorts of things consisting of everybody. They tend to happen quite rarely. But again, within your own kind of team, whatever that team might be, encouraging people to create those kind of events is a good idea. So you don't necessarily want to be driving it yourself and saying, I want us all to have a quiz night on a Friday because I'm the boss. But if you want to encourage some of your people to set those things up, whether that's a conversation about fitness or music or film or a quiz night or just a general kind of chit chat and solve the world's problems, well, that's what they want to do, then let them do that. And if the new employee is able to contribute something to that and has a new idea, well, then fantastic, because immediately they feel involved and engaged from day one.
Excellent. Yeah. Thanks for that. Does anybody else have any questions that they want to put to Tony? Either raise a hand virtually or speak up or anything. I mean, if nobody has, I'll ask another one. I used to kind of have this at the marketing agency quite a bit, where there's kind of like the feeling that people can do this themselves, right? So why would I employ you to do all of this if I can do it myself? You know, what extra benefits would you give to the whole thing over and above what I can do myself? I mean, you might get this. I got this with the agency all the time. Presumably, you get this.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, the honest answer is you can do most of this yourself. The issue is, are you the best person to do it? Do you have the time and the capability to do it? It's a little bit like selling houses to a certain extent. There's nothing stopping you putting a board outside the front of your house with a pretty logo on it and saying it's for sale. You're perfectly entitled to do that. How you go about attracting viewings and doing that and handling it is a different issue. And to a certain extent, it's the same in our business. I've been recruiting people since I was in my early 20s, working for Citibank. I've been running a recruitment company for 15 years. Other people in the team have been equally experienced in recruitment, both doing it themselves and working in recruitment. So there is a lot of experience here, first of all. So if you're a relatively new manager coming in, we can guide you through the process, first of all, through the things that I've mentioned that you need to have in place and the things you need to consider. We certainly have far greater access to potential candidates than you probably do yourself. Again, similar to the house move estate agent scenario. Yes, you could put adverts out there, nothing to stop you, but who's going to find it? Lots of people put their own job, their own recruitment requirements on their own website. Now that works if you're Google, Facebook, British Petroleum, because people naturally come to your website anyway. But let's face it, if you're a small marketing company or an engineering company, how many people actually know about you in the first place and visit your website and see that? So whereas we quite often have a view of what talents are being sought after in the market, and we also have our own what we call talent pool, whereby we already know those individuals that are around and might be considering a job change, and for what reasons. So if you come to us, we should be able to guide you on, okay, how prevalent are those skills in the marketplace, what the correct salary might be, what people are looking for in terms of training, certification, what commute is applicable, would these people want to work remotely or not, all sorts of things a good agency should be able to advise you on. And then when you finally, as well as then actually finding the candidates, if you do it yourself, you've got to come up with some mechanism for sifting 60 applications. It depends on what you're looking for. If it's a fairly popular role, shall we say, then you may well get 60, 70 applications that come through. How are you going to quantify all of those? Do you have the time to do it? Our role is to do that for you and bring that down to a very manageable level of individuals that can do the job. Actually, what's happened to the screen? Can you see me, Pim? My screen just disappeared.
No, we're fine.
Okay, I don't know what happened here. Mine just disappeared. There we go. It's back. I don't know where it went. It disappeared. So that's part of a recruiter's job, is to bring the number down to a manager level and present you all the facts, and to also do an element of, shall we say, background checking into the veracity of a CV. I think we've all written CVs in the past that maybe have been a little generous on what our skills might be or what our experience might be. And candidates do that as well. There is no doubt about it. We have, and most recruiters should have, a very extensive network. So we can also fairly quickly establish the veracity of that CV. And basically is that person truthful to that CV? So when you meet them, you're not running into the issues of, oh, I thought you knew all this stuff, when clearly you don't know this stuff. So there's a lot of work that a recruiter can bring. And then you finally get into the negotiation of, again, we can guide you about where the salary should be, as well as talking to the candidate about your particular company and why they should be joining your organization. We are your brand ambassadors. We are working on your behalf to ensure you're getting the best people joining you and accepting an offer. And then also we can help during that onboarding period with ensuring communication goes on. We try and stay in contact, well, we do stay in contact with candidates. So again, that all helps with that engagement. So there's a lot of things that a recruiter can do right through from, I haven't got a job description, can you help me? Can you help me benchmark salaries? How do I go about this? to finding, to selecting, to sifting candidates down, to working through the interview process, and then offer documentation right the way throughout to onboarding.
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly a lot of expertise there that companies really should tap into and make the most of. That's really good. Thanks. Does anybody have any other questions they want to put to Tony? I'm keen that people walk away from this, getting everything out of it that they want to.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah. Yes, certainly, Richard.
Hi, Anthony. Thanks for the presentation. Interesting stuff. One of the things that characterises our current situation is uncertainty. It probably is the one word that keeps coming up from running a business and looking forward and plans. And whilst we have plans to recruit, the uncertainty of the situation is causing us to hesitate. What do you recommend in that situation, but also from an candidate's point of view, dealing with a business situation where you are going into a business and an environment which has a lot of uncertainty because of the situation? How does that affect the recruitment process, and how do we handle that most fairly?
Okay, two good questions there, Richard. I think on the first one, you're absolutely right. We are in a period of uncertainty. From a business point of view, that's probably one of the worst things ever. Bad news tends not to be an issue. We can all work away and deal with it. It's uncertainty that we don't like. Yeah. If you are thinking of recruiting, I think we come back to what, from your point of view, is really understanding what the business reasons are to recruit. Is it because you're changing focus and therefore you're needing new skills? Is it because actually you don't have enough of the skills that you currently have because you're actually expanding? It's understanding those things first of all, and by working through that, you will come to the point of, okay, we do need new people, but actually with the current capacity we have, we can maintain where we want to be for a period of time, and then we can start the recruitment process. Or you will come to the view of, well, actually, whereas maybe we think we probably need 3 or 4, right, let's start that process and start actually looking at what's on the market, who's out there, and actually starting to bring on, instead of maybe 3 or 4, we're at least bring on 1 and then start looking for the second and the third, whilst there is this level of uncertainty. So I think on that's on the company side. On the employee side, again, you're absolutely right. There are 2 things really, I think, happening from the candidate side at the moment. There are a level of candidates that are either already on notice, made redundant, contractors that are feeling they're not going to get new roles because of changing of working practice. So they are available, and obviously they are motivated to look for a new job. And then you've got another range of potential candidates who are looking at their own employer and thinking, okay, what's going to happen in 3 months' time? I'm currently furloughed. Am I then going to be made redundant? And those individuals are probably an interesting group of individuals for us to be talking to understand what would make them move. Are they actually going to sit there until they're made redundant? And okay, some will want to do that. And if they've been employed for a while, that may be financially beneficial to them. But others may well take that view of, no, I don't want to be in the situation of being made redundant. I don't like the uncertainty that my current employer has. I'd actually quite like to join a company that's got a clear mission, that is clearly growing, that is clearly recruiting, that actually would give me a far more sense of purpose and security and sustainability. So I think it is this case of, as we've said, of understanding your reasons to recruit and being very clear on what those reasons are. And are they reasons that mean you need to recruit now, or is it something you can delay for a period of time, and what the impact will be to your business if you delay? And then from the candidate's point of view is, again, understanding their own circumstances, and being able to talk to individuals about what might make them look for a new role, how comfortable they currently feel with their own organisation and their own work-life balance. I think as a final point on that, Richard, I think one thing that will come out of the pandemic is there will be a lot of individuals when we come out of this that will, in their own particular way, have a major review of their own working arrangements. Yeah. People that have had long commutes and they've just accepted it because it's what they've always done, but they've now been working from home, will be sitting there thinking, I don't actually want to go back to a 1.5 hour drive to work and a 1.5 hour drive home. So I will start thinking about looking at another job that's more local or facilitates remote working. There'll be others that will feel that their employer, for whatever reason, hasn't looked after them in the way that some of their friends and colleagues maybe have. So they will be looking at maybe their own commitment to that employer. And then obviously we unfortunately will have undoubtedly a substantial increase in unemployment. And in that group of individuals, there will be a huge range of people with an immense amount of talent and energy to potentially come and join a new organisation. They've not been made redundant because they're not a good person. They've been made redundant for completely different reasons. And understanding who those people might be could be very advantageous to organisations that are prepared to recruit.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Right, I'm conscious of time. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments they would like to make, or are we all happy with that? I mean, if we are, then we'll leave it there for the recording part of the webinar. So thank you very much.